So this panel is building as user interface. And when we begin to create interactive design, we aim to build applications that connect us to our world. Though often our immersion in technology can detach us from our reality. Here we will be discussing how we foster growth for the AR industry through the architectural lens and create seamless environments for augmented reality that can continue to connect us to the built environment. So my name is Kachina Studer, and I am a user experience and product development lead for AR and VR at AeroStreet.
Hi, I'm Honghao Deng. I'm the creative director of Radical Department. We are a smart home technology firm. In our field, there are so many companies trying to have like multiple devices, like have everything, like smart lightings and also like motion sensors, which they are very similar. And we always think like they are kind of like the supermarket that sell very similar vegetables like bananas and also potatoes. But we are trying to do a little bit different thing on this field, like trying to become the chef who use those materials to curate and build meaningful experience for our clients.
Hi, I'm Jiabao, artist, designer, and engineer. I'm also the partner of Radical Department and a food company, work for a food company that I can't tell.
My name is Kat Schneider. I have the pleasure of working with Kachina at AeroStreet. I'm an architect and interface designer, and for the past 2 years, I've been studying how AR and VR are changing the way we practice architecture, but also, and most importantly, how they're changing our cities and spaces.
Thanks, guys. So as we saw earlier, AR can be just about anything. Like you can occupy any space. It can be generative of anything you could possibly imagine. So if you guys could answer how we can create flexibility in the design space with AR in our environments.
I think in modern days architectural practices, we usually use dynamic transformable space or dynamic transformable furniture to achieve that. Back in the days, I was like doing research here at Media Lab. One thing specifically we found out about like having dynamic transformable space like in people's home is that sometimes people don't want things to move. And then they want things to be reliable and static and ready there all the time. Like one vivid example is that once you have the room become like transformative from a living room to a bedroom, it will become a bedroom forever. Well, like, but definitely having augmented reality come into play helps a lot in this field. Think about using it in office environment. There's so many things in office that is like thought to be ready always be ready there, and also always available for people to use, like the fields, the physical 3D models, everything. And then if you can have those things like be always ready in the digital layer using augmented reality, that basically set free like to use physical world to like hold them. Well, in this case, like architecture can be like more focused on spatial design and the spatial experiences, not only solely focus on the functionalities.
The architecture nowadays is still very static and with those hard boundaries. When we run out of space, we invent elevator and staircase, and hence skyscraper come here. So I wonder with AR as a more dynamic medium, what kind of space can be saved? What kind of things can be omitted? Maybe, for example, in the airport, it's a highly clustered and crowded space, but it's also the most lonely space. There are a lot of lanes and gates that have to change dynamically with the airplane, and the signs and directions may be very confusing. But with AR introduced here, it creates a more clear organization and dynamic ways to maybe introduce new kind of interactions.
I think, as you mentioned, with sort of the limitations of the built environment being pretty straightforward, augmented reality creates this incredible opportunity for us to make our spaces as equitable and usable as possible. I think what I'm really excited about in terms of flexibility is seeing cross-generational use of AR, but also that it could help you personalize a space to what you need a space to be. I worked a little bit in ed tech earlier in the year, and what was really amazing about the AR app we were able to create is you were able to completely shift the color palettes based on color blindness, based on ADHD. things that I had not been familiar with as an architect. So what I'm most excited about in terms of flexibility in AR and architecture is that we can use the technology to essentially meet our users where they are and let them get the most out of the spaces that we're creating using this very personal technology.
I'm really glad all of you guys had different answers for that question. With architecture being a reflection of our society and times, how should designers be thinking about space as a host to these AR applications?
Well, I think there's always an interesting discussion between time and architecture. People always think architecture is timeless because sometimes buildings can outlive them. And then, like, in this case, augmented reality can come into play as a transformative element inside this static content, a static boundary and like container. Well, on the other hand, if you look into a bigger picture, actually augmented reality can outlive architecture. Even architecture, like the buildings demolished or got destroyed, it may be recorded in the augmented reality layer. And that actually become a constant reminder for us in our practice not to build ugly architectures.
Well, I kind of have a different view with the time span of the two medium. Architecture can stand for thousands of years. Some are still functional, some maybe not, but we can still admire this legacy. But augmented reality, they may live longer since we see this digital heritage that can recover the ruins, but they may also live shorter because this kind of emerging technology, it renews so fast. The things we create, this digital layer may not have a device to view anymore many years later. So like similar to in IoT, it's very hard to integrate the smart devices into architecture itself because the two things have very different lifespans. So as designer, how can we keep this in mind and design the space with these two layers that can still coexist many years later?
How do you think AR, being in this environment for a prolonged period of time, how do you think it can provide feedback on the functionality of design and lend itself to the formation of physical design?
Honestly, I think the current way or current workflow of product design or architectural design is already very efficient in terms of using a 2D representation or rendering to help users to navigate and target and build 3D objects with these 2D interfaces. Well, I think adding the richness of augmented reality on top of those tools definitely will help users to understand the overall express of the architecture, but also it definitely need more time to train the users and also the developer to adapt to this new platform. But on the long run, it's definitely better than VR because like inside VR, when you have this giant 3D canvas that is like empty, you don't have any reference of the real world, and the design can easily go off because like there's no comparison to the reality, and also the lack of like building on the physical references make people hard to imagine what the outcome could be. But I certainly believe in the use of augmented reality in realization of 3D designs, because think about like detailed construction drawings. They're like compression of like 3D informations. But at the end of the day, it passes to the general contractor. They have to actually translate the 3D design from the 2D platform. And then like there's a lot of information lost in between. So I think using AR in the construction definitely help like us to provide precision in the realization of the design. I think there are also very powerful use in the iteration of building designs of using augmented reality. I think Jiabao know a lot about that.
Well, one big drawback of architecture is that it's hard to make a lot of user studies and do these iterations like what we do in product design or when we create apps because of the time and cost and the scale it has. But with augmented reality as a design tool, we can simulate the design on site with the weather around, with the neighborhood around, and have people go there and feel about it to give feedbacks, and so we can iterate this design. Also, it can simulate this invisible things like the energy efficiency or Wi-Fi signals or temperature or light and shadow to help optimize this design.
In the panel following this one, our data scientist is here today. He's going to share a lot more of insight in his work. But he's been sitting next to me for the past couple of months. And what's been really great is that as he enhances our practice, he's been pushing me to think, probably in more ways than he knows, to think about how I quantify what makes a piece of architecture successful in metrics that are actually measurable. And I think what's nice about AR and being able to understand and track interactions in AR is that we're able to gain quantitative metrics on how that interstitial airspace around our architecture is utilized, and to think more critically as a designer about how we act on, one, the assumptions we make, but then also the data we're getting as feedback. So that type of evaluation of our work is really prevalent now, and I'm very excited to be a part of it.
So I think architects can utilize augmented reality in a lot of very unique ways. But should architects be part of this augmented reality process? Architecture is not made to be generic. It's made for the way we use a space, and that changes through time. But how do we create augmented interfaces that can blend with the architectural intent and not just become this generic overlay to the form?
I think there might be two extreme out of it. One is that like augmented reality design can be like way smoother and also way efficient in terms of making functional use of the space. In that case, architecture will probably become the white box as a container for those transformative use from augmented reality. But on the other hand, the other extreme may be like augmented reality actually free architecture from all this anxiety of having different decorations inside. And like architecture will be more pure in terms of an art statement and also in terms of like spatial experience. And then it is the augmented reality's job to find form, find function inside the form to achieve the function of architecture and augmented reality altogether. But those are based on the assumption that like architecture itself won't evolve. We actually have a new medium that's created by in our own studio. Is using vapor as tectonic and material to build up architecture, which allow users to experience the richness, diffuseness, and dynamic part of our physical environment. And then this medium actually have a lot of similar parts as augmented reality, which we are going to give a talk at the very end of the presentation today.
To add on that part, architecture is still very binary comparing to the climate outside. Like we turn lights on and off, we bring the rain outside as shower, or we bring the sun outside as heat, or we bring the snow outside as fridge. It's all very specific and intentional with no diffusion in between. But a lot of atmospheric quality from the outside world are completely excluded. But with augmented reality here, I don't just mean the digital visual layer, but also our other senses like olfactory, the tactility, or temperature. These kind of senses can altogether create this diffusiveness. And in our studio, we create vapor as tectonic element to create this atmospheric feeling. And yeah, he will talk about it later.
I think we're out of time, so I'll be brief. But I think since exploring what AR can do, I feel an immense amount of responsibility as an architect to create really dynamic and interesting surfaces for which incredibly talented artists and developers can create really rich AR experiences. I don't think that the white box mentality, where we sort of create these blank spaces and let AR fill that void, is really the future that we're looking at in terms of the design profession. I feel responsible to marry AR and rich form all into one space in order to get the best social interaction.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your panel opportunity here. Thank you.